In the sweltering August of 1945, as the embers of Hiroshima and Nagasaki cooled to ash and shadow, a message crackled through the ether. It wasn't Morse code or radio chatter. It wasn't even a human language, not at first. The signal came in bursts of static, rising and falling, like the breath of something vast and alive. It was picked up at a monitoring station in Nevada, where a young cryptographer named Alan Kreps stared at the readout with growing dread. Whatever it wasn't terrestrial. By the time the first linguistic patterns were discerned, the Pentagon's brightest minds were already on high alert. The message, decoded after days of sleepless effort, read simply, "You have split the atom. You will not do so again. This is not a warning. This is a decree." Alan wasn't the only one who felt the gravity of those words. In a dimly lit conference room beneath the Pentagon, General Jacob Hastings crushed a cigarette in the ashtray, his face pale beneath the harsh fluorescence. "Aliens," he said finally, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "You're telling me little green men are policing our science experiments now?" Dr. Eleanor March, an astrophysicist with the Air Force, pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Not little, not green, but extraterrestrial, almost certainly. This level of complexity in their communication, their understanding of our capabilities. General, they know us better than we know ourselves. Hastings lit another cigarette with shaking hands. "So what happens if we don't listen? What if we test them?" Eleanor hesitated, then slid a single photograph across the table. It showed a barren wasteland where the sands had turned to glass, and in the centre, a smoking crater. "We think they've already tested us." As the Cold War dawned, the threat of global annihilation loomed like a storm cloud over the world. But in the halls of American power, there was another storm brewing, one far stranger, far darker. The aliens' message hadn't been a secret for long. Word had spread through the upper echelons of government, and whispers reached Moscow. The Soviets didn't believe it. Why would they? To them, it was a ploy, another angle in the relentless game of geopolitics. By 1952, President Truman himself sat across from Premier Stalin in a neutral room in Geneva. The air was thick with cigar smoke and suspicion. "They mean it," Truman said, his voice low and deliberate. "They're watching us, all of us. If we so much as test another bomb, they'll wipe us out." Stalin smirked, his fingers drumming against the polished oak of the table. "You expect me to believe your fairy tales, Mr. President? That creatures from the stars care about our wars? Our weapons?" Nyet Truman leaned forward, his face a mask of controlled desperation. "I don't care if you believe me, but if you think this is some kind of bluff, I'll show you what we've seen. Glass plains in the desert, towns erased from the map overnight. They can do it. They will do it." Stalin's smile faltered. For the briefest moment, fear flickered in his eyes. Then he stood, smoothing the wrinkles from his suit. "If they are real, let them come speak to me. Until then, I trust only my weapons. Good day, Mr. Truman." The first abduction happened 2 months later. A Russian physicist working on a new bomb design vanished without a trace from his laboratory. His colleagues found the glass beaker he'd been holding, melted to slag and a burn mark on the floor in the shape of a perfect circle. The Soviets blamed the Americans. The Americans denied everything. But deep in a CIA bunker, Alan Kreps stared at intercepted Soviet transmissions with a growing sense of horror. The aliens weren't just watching, they were intervening. For years, it went on like this. Scientists disappeared. Missile silos malfunctioned at the worst possible moments. Entire test sites were obliterated by mysterious phenomena, blinding lights, seismic tremors. technology shorting out in ways no engineer could explain. By 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis was at its boiling point, and the message from the aliens still rang in the ears of those who knew the truth. You will not do so again. General Hastings, now older and greyer, stood in a war room surrounded by maps and men with trembling hands hovering over red buttons. The air buzzed with urgency as news came in of Soviet ships nearing the blockade. "What if they don't? Stop!" Hastings muttered, pacing like a caged animal. "What if this is it? What if they make us stop?" Alan Kreps, now a senior advisor, looked up from his files. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. A chance to show us what they can really do. Hastings stopped cold, his eyes narrowing. And what if we're wrong? What if we've misunderstood them? Hell, what if they're bluffing too? Alan's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you really want to find out? The world came back from the brink that day, but not because of diplomacy, not because of humanity's better angels. In the dead of night, above the Atlantic, the sky split open like a jagged wound. Witnesses on both sides reported a colossal shape blotting out the stars, its surface shimmering with alien geometries that defied comprehension. A single beam of light lanced downward, freezing the Soviet fleet in its tracks. Engines died. Electrical systems fried. Men wept openly on the decks of their ships. In the end, it was enough. Khrushchev pulled back. The crisis ended. But the message was clear, clearer than ever. This is not a warning. This is a decree. Decades passed, and the memory of those days faded into classified archives and whispered rumors. But those who knew the truth lived with a terrible understanding. The power humanity had unlocked was not its own. And every so often, in the deserts of Nevada or the frozen wastes of Siberia, a flash of light would illuminate the sky, and someone would disappear, leaving behind only questions and the faint smell of ozone. Alan Kreps died in 1989, an old man haunted by the knowledge that his species was not alone, nor in charge of its destiny. As he lay on his deathbed, he whispered to his grandson, "They're still watching, and they'll never stop."